I never thought my life would turn into one of those late-night Reddit betrayal stories you read at 3 in the morning, sipping cold coffee and convincing yourself that other people's disasters could never be yours. Yet here I was, in a sterile hospital room in Chicago, staring at a doctor whose mouth moved like a badly dubbed movie. His words felt like they belonged in someone else's family drama, not mine. "Your newborn has tested positive for HIV." The sentence cracked across my skull like thunder. I wanted to laugh in his face, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. This had to be some kind of cosmic parody, right? Like The Truman Show, but rewritten by conspiracy theorists obsessed with family betrayal and cheating stories. I tried to argue because denial is the only tool you have when the floor collapses. No, doctor, you have the wrong chart. We are a perfectly normal American family. I pay my taxes, I mow my lawn, I even coach Little League. There is no HIV in my story. But the doctor, with his heavy Midwestern drawl and clipboard thicker than the Bible, just shook his head. The test has been run 3 times. The results are consistent. That is when paranoia started to bloom in my chest like wildfire. My first thought was not my child's health, not my wife's tears, but a dangerous whisper. How did this happen, if I have been faithful? I had not lived a life of infidelity. I had not betrayed my vows. I had no skeletons in my suburban closet, which left one horrifying possibility, that my wife, the woman I loved, the woman who smiled like the American dream at our wedding in front of 200 people, had not been faithful to me. But I refuse to believe it. Not yet. Betrayal stories are for strangers on the internet, not for me. So I grasped at absurd explanations. Maybe the hospital was in on some conspiracy. Maybe Big Pharma was running secret experiments on families like mine. Maybe this was revenge from the insurance company for all those times I complained about my premiums. Anything, absolutely anything, made more sense than a cheating wife. The doctor's voice turned grave. "I recommend both you and your wife get tested immediately." His tone implied that my perfect American marriage was now under forensic investigation. I signed papers with a trembling hand, convinced that when my blood results came back negative, it would expose the hospital as the real villain. A revenge story against the medical system. That would be easier to stomach. Hours later, my results came. Negative, completely clean. I should have felt relief, but instead, it was a dagger to the heart. Because if I was negative and the baby was positive, there was only one biological bridge for the virus to cross: my wife. The woman still lying in recovery, looking exhausted and angelic under fluorescent lights. The woman who promised forever. The woman who now wore the invisible label of cheating wife. Of course, I did what any American man soaked in denial would do. I constructed an entire parody universe in my head to protect myself. I told myself maybe she got infected from a blood transfusion during pregnancy. Maybe aliens abducted us one night and tampered with her DNA. Maybe our neighborhood HOA, those tyrants of law and regulations, had orchestrated some bizarre revenge against me for planting the wrong shade of tulips. Because surely betrayal could not happen in my house, in my family. But deep down, betrayal stories have a rhythm you cannot ignore. The late nights she stayed at work meetings. The way she guarded her phone like it contained nuclear codes. The sudden perfume that was not hers. Each memory began rearranging itself like puzzle pieces forming a picture I never wanted to see. I remembered one night she came home smelling like cheap whiskey, laughing too loudly, and when I asked who she was with, she snapped, "Why do you always assume the worst?" Back then I believed her. Now those words replayed like evidence in a trial I never signed up for. As I held my newborn son, tiny and fragile, I felt a cocktail of love and rage. Love for him, rage for the betrayal crawling under my skin. The American dream was collapsing into an American conspiracy thriller, and I was cast as the clueless husband. My life had transformed into one of those revenge stories that strangers online binge read with popcorn. But here is the cruelest part. Even in that moment, I still wanted to believe in my wife. My mind fought to protect her, painting her as the victim of some shadowy plot. Maybe the cheating wife theory was just too easy. Maybe the real story was darker, a government experiment gone wrong, an infidelity planted by fate itself. Anything sounded better than the truth, because the truth was too sharp to hold. As the night dragged on in that hospital room, I whispered to my sleeping son, "We will get through this. We are family." But the word family felt fractured, poisoned. Because family meant trust, and trust had been slaughtered. Betrayal had walked in uninvited and now sat at the head of my table. I did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a long road of revenge, betrayal, and uncovering the twisted truth behind my cheating wife. I was parked across from the private clinic at 2 a.m. with the engine off and my breath fogging the windshield, the kind of scene where a private investigator should be in the passenger seat giving me tough love about evidence and restraint. But all I had was a lukewarm coffee from the 24-hour diner and a playlist called Calm Focus that did absolutely nothing. The clinic's lights glowed a careful blue, the type of blue that says, "We are serious about confidentiality." And on the glass door, a neat white decal read, "Women's Wellness," which was either the universe's idea of parody or the setup to the worst punchline of my life. 2 hours earlier, I had found the hospital discharge file my wife thought she had hidden beneath old Christmas stockings, and tucked among the forms was a crumpled receipt from this very clinic, 2 separate appointments billed to a private card I did not recognize. In the corner, a scribbled note that read, "Follow up with Dr. A." I told myself the A stood for angel. A as in all good. A as in absolutely not cheating. Of course I knew A could also stand for the man whose name would end my marriage. I tried to be rational, but rational had left the building with Elvis and my peace of mind. It would make sense to tell this story in chronological order, but betrayal does not respect chronology, and neither does rage. So let me reverse it. Before the stakeout, before the clinic, before the coffee, there was an evening at home where my wife stood in the kitchen with a grocery bag from a pharmacy and would not let me help unpack it. She is a persuasive person, my wife, the kind who can sell you on kale the way car salesmen sell convertibles, and she gave me a smile that said, "Please do not ask." When she went upstairs, I opened the trash and found what I had been looking for since the doctor's sentence shattered our house. There was an information leaflet about antiretroviral therapy and a tiny folded note from a nurse with a hotline number and the phrase, "You are not alone." I am not proud of what I did next. I took pictures of everything, because in America, if you love your family, you document your sorrow like a court exhibit. Then I stood there among the ordinary mess of our life, school flyers and cereal boxes and a baseball glove drying on the counter, and I felt the flimsy paper of normalcy tear in my hands. Back in the car outside the clinic, I watched a rideshare pull up and a man step out in a puffer jacket, bearded, phone in hand, a face that could be every tech worker in every city. He rang the bell and a nurse let him in. I told myself it was none of my business, and then immediately made it my business. I imagined him laughing with my wife in a waiting room lined with inspirational posters that promised empowerment and discretion. I imagined a wellness coach named Kyra who said words like energetic boundary and radical acceptance while selling essential oils. I imagined a shadow organization inside Big Pharma whispering about trial cohorts and patent cliffs and a line of revenue that would thrive on families like mine. When life is too ugly for the plain truth, conspiracy steps in and dresses the wound with glitter. It does not heal anything, but in the dark, glitter looks like answers. After 20 listless minutes, I checked the phone records I had pulled from the family plan that morning, numbers with no names, late calls that stretched into the night. There was one number that came up again and again, always after midnight, always with the call duration that suggested long silences and whispered apologies. I pasted it into a search and got nothing. I pasted it again with quotation marks, as if punctuation could force the universe to confess. Then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I texted the number from my phone and wrote, "Is this Dr. A?" The bubble lingered. No response. I deleted it because shame demands neatness, even when life is broken. I told myself I was a good man, and good men do not behave like this. Then I remembered that good men can be stupid for very long periods of time, and stupidity is not a defense against betrayal. When I finally went home and slid into bed beside my wife, she stirred and murmured something about a lactation consultant. I said nothing because my voice would have betrayed me. In the dark, I could feel the heat of her shoulder and the cold of my thoughts. My son fussed in the bassinet, and the sound traveled through me like a wire carrying current. Family is not only blood and vows, it is also maintenance, the humble electricity of showing up every day. I wanted to hold on to that, the ordinary loyalty of making breakfast and packing lunches and arguing about which trash day is recycling. But the word infidelity had taken root, a weed you cannot pull without ripping out the garden. The next morning, I tested a theory. Instead of acting broken, I acted breezy, a parody of Breezy, a sitcom husband doing bits. I asked if she wanted me to drop by her office at lunch with her favorite salad. She said she had a full day of meetings and a work dinner and a strategy call at 9, and then a late run to clear her head. Which is a lot of running for a woman who has said for 10 years that the only reason to run is if a bear is chasing you. I said no problem, and she kissed my cheek, and I smelled a perfume that was not the one she keeps on the dresser. That is how betrayal stories announce themselves in America, not with violins, but with products you can buy at a mall. By noon, the sitcom was canceled. I logged into the laptop we technically shared and found an email account I did not know about, tucked behind a clever filter that rerouted confirmations and receipts. 5 messages from the clinic, one from a man named Aaron who wrote in careful, managerial sentences about protecting careers and keeping families safe. Which is the exact type of sentence that makes your stomach drop because it only exists to hide the body. I clicked an attachment and found a rental agreement for a storage unit on the edge of the city, paid for by a card with the last 4 digits I had never seen. If this were a movie, the storage unit would hold a safe with passports and stacks of cash and a document labeled Revenge Plan, but life is cheaper and stranger. When I got there that afternoon, heart pounding, hand shaking, I found a shoebox with a label maker tag that read Keepsakes, and inside were receipts, prescription printouts, and a photo booth strip of my wife leaning into a man whose face was cropped out with an office scissors. The scissor work was clean but not expert. The frame edges were rough where they had tried to erase him. The result looked like a ghost had learned to cuddle. I drove around the block 6 times, parked in front of a laundromat, and texted my oldest friend, the one who still believed that marriage could be a fortress if you kept the drawbridge up. He came without asking questions, because that is how family works when the law of blood has to be rewritten by the law of loyalty. He looked at the photo booth strip and the receipts and the cold, practical evidence of a cheating wife, and he put the box back down with a care that made me want to break things. He did not say, "I told you so." He said, "This is going to hurt for a long time, and I will be with you for the long time." Then he added, "You need a lawyer who knows how betrayal works in a courtroom, and you need a doctor who will tell you what is real and what is noise. Get both. Get them now." It was so American I could have wept, our impulse to operationalize grief. We treat devastation like a project plan with milestones. Consult counsel, consult care, build a calendar invite for sorrow. On the way home, I pulled into a church parking lot, even though I am not the praying type, and I sat there thinking about revenge with a seriousness that scared me. Not the theatrical kind where you key a car or write a viral post and watch the internet do its work, but the quiet, lasting revenge of becoming an impenetrable man who will never again be surprised. That is a terrible ambition to replace wonder with armor, but betrayal recommends it as if it were therapy. I pictured conversations with my son in the future, how I would refuse to badmouth his mother, how I would answer the question, "Why did this happen?" with, "We will never know everything, and I am sorry, and I love you." I also pictured taking everything from her in court because family court is where kindness goes to be cross-examined. I hated that I could hold both pictures at once. I hated that revenge could feel like relief. By the time I turned onto our street, the sun was sinking, the kind of Midwest gold that makes every porch look honest. Our neighbor waved from his lawn, and I waved back, like an actor who has forgotten his lines. Inside, my wife had set the table with takeout containers from the Thai place we like, and for a second I saw how a life can continue performing itself even after the script has been ripped to shreds. She told a story about her day that had the right nouns and the right verbs, but not the right music. And I nodded in all the right places because in America we do not interrogate at dinner. We gather our evidence and wait for the scene where the confrontation cannot be postponed. After we put the baby down, she said she was going for that run, and I said I would come with her. And she said she needed to clear her head alone, and that is when I stopped being breezy. I told her I had found the storage unit. I told her I had read the emails. I told her I had seen the clinic receipts and the photo booth strip where a ghost had learned to cuddle. She went white, and then crimson, and then something I had never seen before, a color that belongs to the moment when your narrative dies. For a long time she did not speak. Then she said, very calmly, "This is not what you think," which is the national anthem of infidelity. I said, "I am thinking my newborn has HIV and I am negative, and there is no math to support our marriage that does not involve you and another man." She opened her mouth and closed it and opened it again. And finally she told me a version of the truth, the version where she had an affair that she convinced herself was not cheating because it was happening in a different emotional time zone, the version where she was lonely and foolish and believed a story about a safe partner who turned out to be a liar. She said she was sorry so many times the word emptied itself of meaning. I heard only the clatter of all the American words we use to rebuild after earthquakes. We will do therapy. We will set boundaries. We will move forward. I did not promise anything. I sat there in the living room where our wedding photos smiled down at us from the mantel, and I said the only honest sentence I had left. I said, "You have turned my life into a story I would never have read, and I do not know how to live in it." Outside, a siren moved up the avenue, and for a second it sounded like an alarm I could disable if I just found the right switch. Inside, the baby stirred and fell quiet. Somewhere in my chest, a calculation completed itself. Not cleanly, not finally, but enough to light a path to the next scene. I knew the confrontation was coming, and it would not be small. I knew the word family would have to be defined again from the ground up. I knew that betrayal is not a single event, but a long echo. And I knew that the story of my cheating wife would not be content to end in our living room. It would demand witnesses. It would demand consequences. It would demand the kind of truth you can only tell under oath. There are confrontations that play like courtroom dramas with carefully prepared evidence and a calm cross-examination. And then there are confrontations like mine, louder, messier, more like a pay-per-view wrestling match where the referee has left the ring and the audience is screaming for blood. I had promised myself I would wait, that I would speak with strategy like a lawyer mapping out revenge in front of a jury. But betrayal has its own clock, and when it strikes midnight, you either explode or you collapse. I exploded. It started with a simple question over morning coffee. "Where were you last Thursday night?" My wife blinked, a fraction too long, then smiled that same American suburbia smile that could disarm nosy neighbors and church ladies alike. "I told you, strategy dinner with the regional team." Her tone was breezy, sitcom breezy, but sitcoms always had laugh tracks. Our kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the fridge that sounded like a lie detector failing. "Funny," and I said, sliding the clinic receipt across the table like a poker chip, "because Dr. B doesn't. He doesn't work for your regional team." The paper fluttered between us, flimsy yet heavy as a gavel. She stared at it, then back at me, and I swear I saw her body flinch the way a boxer does when he knows the knockout punch is seconds away. She tried to pivot because cheaters are part-time politicians, always campaigning for a new version of the truth. "You don't understand. It's not like that," she said, and those words are the national anthem of infidelity. I stood so fast the chair screeched against the tile. My voice cracked, the morning wide open. "Not like that? Our newborn has HIV. I'm negative, and you're telling me it's not like that? Then what is it like? Enlighten me, because the math says cheating wife." Her lips trembled. For 1 second I saw the woman I married, terrified and small. Then she hardened, like betrayal had sculpted her into something metallic. She whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." The line was so absurd I almost laughed. What was it, an accident? She slipped and fell into another man's arms. Infidelity by gravity, adultery by clumsiness. If this were parody, the studio audience would be howling. I pressed harder, because once you start cross-examining, you cannot stop. "Who is he? Tell me his name. Tell me if he knows he destroyed a family." My voice echoed, bouncing off the walls lined with family photos that now looked like crime scene evidence. She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks, but still clinging to secrecy like it was oxygen. "It doesn't matter. He's gone." "Gone?" I barked. "What are we talking about? Witness protection? Alien abduction? Or did you bury him under the rose bushes with your wedding vows?" The paranoia poured out of me. Betrayal stories don't just make you angry. They make you a conspiracy theorist of your own marriage. Every business trip, every girls' night, every password change, suddenly it was all evidence. Finally, she cracked. "It was Aaron." The name hit the room like a grenade. Aaron, the coworker she always called reliable. Aaron, the man who helped her with late-night reports. Aaron, whose name had appeared in those secret emails. I laughed, but it was a broken laugh, the kind that makes your chest hurt. "Reliable Aaron," I muttered. "Reliable enough to give my wife HIV. Reliable enough to ruin my family. Hell of a legacy." The rage in me shifted from fire to ice. My hand steadied. My words sharpened. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our vows. You betrayed our child. And for what? For some office fling with a man whose reliability was about as strong as a paper umbrella in a hurricane?" She sobbed, reaching across the table. "I thought it was safe. I thought it was harmless. I cut her off. "You thought wrong. You gambled with our family, and the house always wins, and now the house is on fire." I wish I could say I handled it like a saint. But saints do not live in Chicago suburbia, trying to pay mortgages and pretend betrayal is just a plot twist. No, I let the anger perform. I slammed my fist into the table so hard the coffee mug cracked. I shouted so loud the baby stirred in his crib upstairs. And in the middle of it all, some absurd part of me wondered if this would play well on Reddit Betrayal Diaries. If strangers across America would scroll and whisper, "Damn, this cheating wife story is wild." She begged then. She fell to her knees in our kitchen, hands clasped as if we had reversed roles, and she was the sinner at my confessional. "Please, please don't leave. Please, for the baby. He needs both of us." Her words dripped with desperation, but I could hear the subtext. "Stay, so my betrayal won't look so catastrophic. Stay, so I can rebuild my image as wife and mother. Stay, so the story does not end with me as the villain, but villains never get to write the ending. I told her the truth, cold and final. You're right. He needs both of us, but not under the same roof, not with lies poisoning the air. I will be his father, I will be his family, but I will never again be your husband. Not after this, not after you became a cheating wife and destroyed everything. She wailed, and in that wail was the sound of collapse. I did not comfort her. I could not, because betrayal is not a wound you bandage with quick apologies. Betrayal is a demolition, and sometimes the only honest thing to do is stand there and watch the walls fall. That night I called a lawyer. His voice was brisk, efficient, the kind of man who had built a career on turning heartbreak into billable hours. "We'll need DNA tests, medical records, financial disclosures," he said, already sketching the blueprint of revenge. "Cheating complicates custody battles, but we can work with it. Betrayal leaves fingerprints, and judges do not like fingerprints." I hung up and sat alone in the living room, staring at the turned-over family photo on the coffee table. The faces smiled back at me from before the implosion, before the cheating wife, before the betrayal turned me into this version of myself. I whispered to the empty room, "I will not let this destroy me. I will rebuild. I will take revenge, not with fists, not with violence, but with truth, with law, with the clarity of exposing what you are." Outside, the streetlights hummed. Inside, the silence was thick. And for the first time since the doctor's sentence detonated my life, I felt something like direction. The confrontation was over. The aftermath was coming. And betrayal stories always save their sharpest blade for the final act. There is an old American saying they put on mugs and motivational posters. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I always thought it was the kind of nonsense you buy at a home goods clearance rack, right next to the scented candles and fake succulents. But in the weeks after my marriage imploded, I realized it was not wisdom at all. It was a threat. Because betrayal does not make you stronger. Betrayal makes you harder, colder, more suspicious. Betrayal makes you a man who counts receipts and watches clocks, a man who carries his rage like a second wallet. The first step of my revenge was paperwork. I hired the lawyer, the one with steel gray hair and a handshake like sandpaper. He told me to treat this not as heartbreak, but as a project plan. Step 1, establish paternity. Step 2, establish infection timeline. Step 3, demonstrate betrayal. Infidelity is not just a word, it's leverage. He spoke like a man ordering a steak, medium rare. I listened, nodding, feeling the American legal machine revving up under my feet like a Harley. This was not a love story anymore. This was litigation. This was survival. The DNA test confirmed what I had secretly hoped and dreaded. The child was mine, my son. Flesh of my flesh, though his tiny blood carried the virus that should never have been there. That revelation ripped me open. Because how do you look at your own baby and see both unconditional love and the living evidence of your wife's betrayal? It was like staring into a mirror that reflected two different men, the father who would die for his child and the husband who would never forgive his cheating wife. My lawyer called it grounds. I called it hell. But grounds are what American courts understand. Betrayal has to be converted into clauses, custody percentages, and alimony calculations. It is the cruel alchemy of the system, your pain turned into exhibits. I submitted every clinic receipt, every email, every late-night phone record. I built a case the way conspiracy theorists build cork boards, with strings connecting dates, times, lies. Except my board did not live in a basement. It lived in a courtroom, under fluorescent lights, with a judge staring down at me like God with a gavel. My wife tried to bargain. She showed up at mediation with her hair perfect and her eyes red, a parody of the repentant spouse. She said the words she thought would soften me. I never stopped loving you. I just made a mistake. Our family deserves another chance. But family is not a sweater you can knit back together after slashing it with scissors. Family is trust, and once trust is dead, the corpse stinks forever. I told her I would raise my son, I would fight for him, but I would never again share a roof with a cheating wife. Her tears fell, but tears cannot erase HIV, cannot erase infidelity, cannot erase betrayal carved into the foundation of our house. People think revenge is about explosions, about smashing cars with baseball bats or keying the side of someone's Lexus. But in America, the sharpest revenge is boring. It is legal. It is financial. It is the slow, grinding process of stripping someone of the story they wanted to tell. I did not scream at her in court. I did not throw chairs. I simply let the documents speak. Every lie she told me became a line in an affidavit. Every night she slipped away became a timestamp. Every whisper with Aaron became a betrayal story recorded in black and white. And the judge, who had probably seen hundreds of cheating wife cases, frowned as if my story still carried the weight of tragedy. When custody was awarded to me with supervised visitation for her, I felt no joy. Revenge is not sweet, it is bitter, but bitterness can be fuel. I took my son home to a smaller house, a quieter house, but a house without lies. I painted his room blue, the kind of hopeful American blue you see in baby catalogs. I sat in the rocker at night and told him stories, not fairy tales, but cautionary tales. I whispered, "Your father will never lie to you. Your father will protect you. Your father will teach you that betrayal is a fire, and you do not play with matches." My wife tried, of course, to claw her way back into my good graces. She sent letters, long confessions filled with "if only" and "what if" and "please forgive." She left voicemails where her voice cracked, promising she had ended all contact with Aaron, promising she was in therapy, promising she would be better. But betrayal is not undone by promises. Betrayal is a permanent tattoo carved into bone. And every time I heard her voice, I remembered the doctor's sentence, "Your newborn has tested positive for HIV." That line is not a sentence, it is a life sentence. In darker moments, I wondered if I had overreacted, if the Reddit stories I binge-read had infected my brain, if maybe forgiveness was the braver path. But then I would look at my son's medication schedule, at the pills too small for his hands, and I knew forgiveness is for small wounds. This was not small. This was systemic. This was betrayal that spread like a virus, literally. Friends and neighbors whispered, of course. Suburbia thrives on gossip. Some said I was cruel. Some said she was the victim. Some said every marriage has cracks. But in the grocery store aisle, when strangers nodded at me, I knew they had read between the lines. They saw the single father holding a baby with tired eyes and thought, "There goes a man who lived through hell." And in their silence, I heard a strange respect. Do not mistake me. This is not a story of victory. This is a story of survival. Betrayal does not crown you a hero. Betrayal leaves you scarred, suspicious, but alive. And in America, sometimes alive is the best you can ask for. I never wanted revenge to define me, but perhaps revenge is just another word for refusing to be erased. One night, months later, I sat in my quiet house with my son asleep upstairs, and I wrote the final sentence in the journal I had kept since the day of his birth. It was not poetry. It was not wisdom. It was just truth. I wrote, "She betrayed me, she destroyed our family, but she forgot one thing. Truth always comes out, and I will never forgive a cheating wife." Then I closed the journal, turned off the light, and let the silence settle. Outside, the world kept spinning, the streetlights hummed, and betrayal became just another chapter in the long, messy book of family drama stories. But in that silence, for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not sweet, not clean, but peace all the same.